Hello, fabulous listeners. Thanks for tuning in to Old Bodies Outside. This is your host, Brian Peterson. And today is another solo episode. And I wanted to talk about the sense of accomplishment, the power of mindset, and some of those things that just honestly really helped me as a person and moving from day to day and looking back and being proud of myself. And I was wanted to put this in the context of yesterday. I went out and ran a solo 50-mile training run, and the hope was to, when I initially thought I wanted to run 50 miles on this weekend, I looked for races all in my region across Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Missouri. I could not find anything, and so I was like, you know what? I don't need a race to run 50 miles. And so I went out and I did that by myself. Now, running 50 miles by yourself, that's pretty hard to do. And it takes a heavy amount of discipline to make that happen. And I almost didn't make it out in the morning because there was thunderstorms. And it turned out the thunderstorms were not over the area where I was going to be running, but they were a little bit to the north and we're going to be out of my way. So I was going to be safe. But I almost convinced myself that it wasn't going to be safe. But luckily, after reviewing radar 3 to 4 times to validate myself, I finally was like, okay, radar is showing that this thunderstorm is not going to hit me while I'm running. And so with doing a 50-mile training run, I need to be out all day. And I got started running at 5:30 in the morning. I got up at 4 a.m., got running by 5:30, and I was out there for well into the afternoon. Now, I've had a lot of people come up to me like, Brian, that is so stupid. Why would you want to run a 50-mile day? And yeah, there's a level of surface level stupidity to it. And maybe it takes a level of surface level stupidity. But I got to say that doing things in life that give you a sense of accomplishment and gratification, it really fuels me. And it fuels me in that I feel proud of myself. And nothing else really quite hits the same. I feel proud about the accomplishments at work. I feel proud about helping people. I feel proud of, being in a fantastic marriage and having a fantastic family. I feel proud of being a son and a brother. But it's different with running something like that, where it's all of my work put in and I get to see the product of it and I get to feel that. And I think that one of the things with doing something like that is it is a solo mission. It's not something that I'm out there, sharing it with someone. And I do love sharing experiences with people, but kind of doing it and going out by myself was just something that added to the amazing aspect of it. And I did have some help along the way. I wasn't perfectly solo, which I'm grateful for. I had a friend come and join me for 8.3 miles from about mile 10 to 18.3. And then my wife came out and ran with me in the last from like mile 38 to 48. She was somewhat near me. We were kind of running near each other, but at different paces. And she was like, hey, just run at whatever pace you're comfortable at. And I'll be kind of near you and whatnot. And so we did that. It was honestly just such a fantastic experience. And it's something that I wanted to do. I'm running Run Rabbit Run 100 miler, as a lot of you know, on September 15th. And I'm a big fan of having a 50-mile race 2 or 3 weeks out to get me ready for that 100-mile race. And so that was the initial step, was, okay, this weekend, it was 3 weekends out from Run Rabbit Run. And so I wanted to get that 50-mile training run in. Next weekend is Labor Day weekend. And yes, I could have done a 50-mile training run that weekend, but with it being the longer weekend, I figured it'd be good for me to get up and out to the mountains. And so I'm going to go and do a couple 14ers in Colorado. I'm going to go out to Buena Vista, Colorado. I'm going to drive out there on Friday, and I'll start off on Friday. I'll get there in the afternoon. I'll do an 1.5-hour run on the Colorado Trail. And then on Saturday, I'm going to do the southwest ridge of Mount Princeton. And supposedly it's about 3 miles long to the top, and you gain about 5,000 feet. With it being Labor Day weekend, it'll be good to not be on a trail that's going to be very popular. Princeton is a very popular peak, and the approach from the east is very, very popular. And so doing the Southwest Ridge, I think, will offer me some nice solitude. I am going out with my wife. It's something that we're going to do together, but it's also going to be something that is very beneficial for me for Run Rabbit Run. And then the next day on Saturday, I'm going to do the East Ridge or the East Ridge cutoff up to Mount Yell. And I'm going to make that decision the day before when I'm in Buena Vista. I'm trying to get in total 12 hours of time up in the mountains, moving around between Saturday and Sunday. But I would also like to kind of do some relaxing and check out Buena Vista, go up to Leadville. So we're trying to get 12 hours between the 2 days. If I do 7 hours on Saturday, then Sunday I won't be looking to do as much. And so I might do the East Ridge cutoff up to Yell. Now, similarly for Princeton, Yale has a very popular common trail up to it that I'm going to avoid. I'm going to take this East Ridge up. I haven't really looked at the East Ridge too much, but I know that it's something that is not uncommon. People do it. And I don't know if it has any class 2, class 3. It probably has class 2, but probably not class 3 terrain. The Southwest Ridge of Princeton, on the other hand, does have class 3, but I think there are some ways that you can bypass that with class 2 if you choose to. So going back to doing this 50-mile race and talking about sense of accomplishment and mindset in life. And I think it's really important to adopt the mindset of being proud of yourself and having those accomplishments, things that you can look back on and you're just like, wow, I did that. That was cool. And completely disregarding what other people might think of it. I mean, I've already gotten text messages that from friends and family poking fun at me for being like, that's a stupid thing that you did for going out for 50 miles. Completely disregarding that, because I know that looking back and doing something like this, it's really, really healthy for me. It feels good. It feels great. And so for those of you out there that are just like, well, I'm not interested in running 50 miles. I think that's very fair. I think that it's probably a good idea instead to be like, hey, why don't I just go out for 8 to 10 hours and set a goal? Be like, okay, I'm going to go out for 9 hours. I don't care about my pace. I don't care about the distance I run, nor do I care about how much I walk. I'm just going to go out into nature and be in motion for 9 hours. And the benefits will be amazing. There's no doubt about that. You will enjoy it. That's one way to do it instead of looking at the distance. And so I did talk on my last solo episode that I, on a day-to-day basis, pay attention to how much time I'm running. I don't pay attention to my distance or pace. So tomorrow morning, I'm going out and I'm running for an hour and a half. Today, I went running for an hour. I don't care about my pace or distance during those times. Yesterday, I think, will be my one exception training for Run Rabbit Run in which I cared for the distance. And that was fun to try something, a little bit different compared to how I do train. And so I do want to talk a little bit about how my day went. And recently in Kansas, it's been really, really hot and humid. And I really lucked out with the weather. On Saturday, the weather was pretty much perfect. By all standards, perfect. We had been having a lot of 107-degree days, 108-degree days, lots of humidity. A week ago, we had a 115-degree day, and we were the hottest place in the country. It's been really challenging with training. And I go running at 5 or 5:30 most days, and I would just be completely drenched. And this is heat plus humidity. Yesterday, I was very fortunate that heat finally broke. It was in the forecast. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. I don't know if I would have survived if it was going to be a 106-degree day or 107-degree day. But I set my alarm for 4 a.m. and I got up and I looked at the thunderstorms and I wasn't so sure I was going to go. I actually laid back down. And that's the first time I've laid back down during my whole training cycle for Run Rabbit Run. I laid back down and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to sleep for an hour. And luckily I had anxiety about falling asleep. And I couldn't fall back asleep. And so that's when I started looking at the radar. And the radar started validating, hey, this storm is going to go north of where I'm going running. Like, I'll be just fine. I might get a little bit of some sprinkles, but past that, nothing else. So I got myself up and going. And the night before, I packed everything up. I packed up way too much fluids. I packed up 4 gallons of water, 6 1-liter Gatorades. I packed a bunch of Honey Stinger little chews that are similar to the Cliff Bar shock blocks, I think they're called. I had a couple gels with me. I had a bunch of Noon tablets with me. I had some salt tablets with me. And I drove out to go running at this place called Kanza Biological Station, which is about 30 minutes from where I live. And it's my favorite place to run locally. It's a bit far for me, so I can't get out there every day. But for something like this, yeah, I'm going to drive that 30 minutes out. And they got about, I was hitting everything. I think they got, well, I was missing one little part, but I think they have about probably 8.5 miles total of trails at Kanza Biological Station. And they call it Kanza Biological Station because Kansas State University does a bunch of research there. And myself included, I'll be doing some research there in the upcoming future. I'm actually have a meeting about that tomorrow. So I got out there, started running at 5:30, which was great because I was starting in the dark and I got to kind of test out my lighting system, which I do that on almost an everyday basis. But I had my headlight going and my waist light going. And the waist light is something that is new to me. And my headlamp is new to me. And those are 2 things that I actually worry about with Run Rabbit Run. They use rechargeable batteries. And if you have the headlamp on high, you have the waist lamp on high, the battery life is like 4 hours or something. And so maybe the best idea is not to run them on high all the time. Like if you're hiking uphill, run them on low or medium, which I likely will do. But when I bought my headlamp and I bought my waist lamp, I bought 3 extra batteries to get myself through the night. And so there'll be, as I'm going through the night, at each aid station where there's a drop bag or where I see my wife Jessa, I will put a new battery in the headlamp and in the waist lamp. So anyways, got started at 5:30, and the night before I had a huge dinner. I ate dinner with Jessa's parents. It was their 47th anniversary. Her sister was in town, so we had a nice dinner. And Jessa and her sister got the dinner catered, and everything was vegan friendly. I've been vegan since 2011, and so there was just a lot of fantastic food. Even the cake was vegan. And so I ate a lot that night. And in fact, during the 50-mile run, I was not hungry until I was about 4 hours into my run. So I did the first 10 miles, and probably around like mile 6 or 7, it started getting light out. And at mile 10, I came into the aid. My truck served as the aid station. And so my plan was to do this 8.3 mile loop a lot of times and just keep coming back to my truck for my aid. And so I had a cooler in there, which had all the water, all the Gatorade. I had a bag with all my snacks and salt tablets and Noon tablets and extra stuff like sunscreen and Vaseline and Body Glide, stuff like that. So I came back to my aid station, which was my truck, and I met my buddy, Mike Drape. And so that was actually kind of an interesting story in itself. Mike and I, I've never met Mike in person. So he's a local trail runner who has just started getting into ultra running, and he's really interested in it, really enjoys it, really loves it a lot. And my wife has crossed paths with him and gave Mike my number. And so we've been texting a bunch. We had a phone conversation at one time, just talking about ultra running and just having these fantastic conversations, honestly, like just ones that have actually really inspired me to continue with my training, and just hearing how excited he is about the sport and being a part of the community. And he's got an upcoming race too, has been something that's really pushed me along with my training. Unfortunately, though, we've not had the time to get together to actually go and train. And we live about probably 15, 20 minutes apart. Finally, our schedules aligned. He was willing to drive out and meet me for a little over 8 miles. And so he came out and met me for, up between we ran about from like mile 10 to about mile 18.3 or so. Probably wasn't perfectly right at mile 10 when we started off. But it was nice to share some miles with him. And we talked the whole time and talked a lot about ultra running. And he taught me some stuff. We both have the same vest, and I struggle with my vest a lot of the times. I have one of the Salomon vests, and I struggle with the soft flask water bottles. And I love the idea of them. I love not having stuff in my hands, but I hate pulling them out at an aid station, getting them filled up, and then getting them back in. According to Mike, it's a lot easier to get them back in if you just take your vest off and slide it in. It'll just drop right in. I've always been trying to get it on with my vest on, so I'll have to try that out. But I did end up, what I did for my run yesterday was I wore a vest to keep stuff in. So like chapstick, my car keys, food, salt tablets. And I had 2 handheld water bottles. And I have run 600-mile races to this point. Beyond that, every single ultra marathon I have done, I have used handheld water bottles. But that will change if someday I get into the Hard Rock 100. Like, I will want to use poles for that. And that's another thing. I've never used poles for any races. So I used my handheld water bottles the entire time. Each one's 20 ounces. So I was carrying 40 ounces of capacity and filling that up every 8.3 miles. Eventually Mike took off after his 8 miles, and then I had some solo miles by myself, which felt good to kind of just see how stuff feels. I went through some really tight, I had some tightness through the run at this point. I was really having a hard time with my right hip and my right hip flexor. That eventually though loosened up. And it was interesting. I actually found that loosened up if I pushed my pace a little bit, opposed to kind of conserving my pace. And I was fine with that. I was like, you know what? This is a training run. I don't mind moving a little bit faster and possibly blowing up. I was not worried about blowing up. If I blew up, then I walk it in. Not a big deal. And speaking of that, because this was a training race, I have trained right through, a training race. I don't know what you want to call it. Training run, 50 miles. I trained right through it. So Friday I ran 2 hours. And then today I got up and ran an hour, and you know what? I don't know if I've ever run the day after a 50 miler. And I was surprised that I didn't feel that bad. I figured I'd just be, barely able to run, kind of just barely keeping pace and tripping around and whatnot, because my legs would be so heavy. In fact, I had some gears in my legs, and I went running over at my local trail systems just down the street. We got about 2 miles there, Mount Mitchell Heritage Park, which I love. I wasn't, I didn't have too many issues. Like, I was able, like, after a few minutes, I was able to get right into it, and was able to have, some gears in my legs going up and down some hills and whatnot. And so going back to yesterday, once I got to about mile 38, my wife came and met me. And that was something that was really nice, because I'd been doing this 8.3 mile lap over and over and over to get up to 50 miles. And it was getting monotonous and boring. And so it was nice to be able to share some miles in proximity with her. We were running at different paces, as I mentioned, but have some miles in proximity. And just to have that support out there was really fantastic. And then eventually she needed to head out right before I was kind of finishing, because we needed to get the kids home. And there's just a logistical snafu there that we had to go pick up the kids. So she didn't get to see me finish, but she practically got to see me finish. So that kind of sums up my run of doing a 50-mile training run. It's not something I'd want to do every weekend. It'd be kind of boring with running 8.3 mile loops. But I got to say, I was comparing that to when I've lived in the mountains in Salt Lake City. And in Salt Lake City, I would commonly go out for 8-hour training days. And there's no way I would cover 50 miles in 8 hours in the mountains of Salt Lake. I would cover 20, I don't know, 25, something like that, something really low. But even doing those 8-hour days would just feel so great, almost like liberating. And I wanted to go back to what I was mentioning earlier. Give yourself the mindset that you can do this stuff, because you can. Don't put that pressure on yourself that you got to get a certain distance in. You got to get a certain pace in, or any of that. Just go out there and have fun. Don't even worry about how much you walk. Think about this. When you are in mountainous terrain and you're going to go out for 8 hours, and say you're just doing the steepest of stuff, you are absolutely going to walk. Everyone walks that. Everyone. There's no way some of the steep mountains I've been on that people can even run it all. And at that point, it's so liberating because I don't feel the pressure of trying to keep a pace or trying to keep a distance. Instead, I'm just focused on, I'm going to finish this loop at some point and it's no big deal. And I think that mindset can be adopted for whatever landscape you're training in. If you're out in the desert, if you're out coastal, if you're out in the plains, if you're out in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, adopt the mindset of like, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to enjoy this and have fun. I'm not going to put the pressure on myself of running a certain pace, going a certain distance, or worrying about how much I walk. I'm just going to go out and do it. And adopt that mindset and do it. You'll be liberated from all those personal expectations that we all love to put on ourselves. And then you get the benefit of the icing on the cake. And that's the sense of accomplishment when you've done it. So go out and give that a shot. We all can do it. And it's something that, as I said, it's something that helps me and fuels me through life. It's great to look back and be like, dang, that was crazy. I went out and did a 50-mile training day. Or dang, that was crazy. I went out and did an 8-hour training day. Yeah, that is crazy. Be proud of yourself and be proud of yourself about that for the rest of your life. And how many things in your life can you say about that you'll be that proud to that level for the rest of your life? And these are things that are so fantastic about bipedal locomotion, going running, going hiking. You can do that stuff that you're going to look back on for the rest of your life and be like, yeah, that was hardcore. Way to get after it. Pat on the back to myself. Okay, everyone, I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you for the next episode. Have a good one. Bye.
Yeah.